Hello, everyone, and welcome to an extra special episode of Hotline
It's
League.
not. You can't keep saying this.
Well, this one's special because it's going to be probably a little shorter, and it's a themed episode. When we don't get to do too many of these themed episodes, you know, because normally we've got so many things to talk about, and this time we don't.
Yeah, it's special in the sense that, like the last couple, we're in the middle of the dead patch. Europe finally finished their season, and now we have yet another basically month before World starts. Play-ins begins the 10th. I think the fourth place EU versus NA match is the 9th then, because I think it's the day before.
Yeah, it's the day before.
Yep.
So, Mark, do you want to provide the context on why you might be a little loopy this episode?
Yeah, so like I was saying before the show started, and I've said a couple times over the past weeks, Ashley has had jury duty. It has finally ended today, but it was a rough turnaround because she worked overnight from Saturday into Sunday, and I stayed up for that. And then I basically got up at like 6 o'clock on Sunday, 6 p.m. on Sunday, and then had basically been up until noon on Monday because she had to be awake for jury duty. And then I dropped her off and picked her up, and then I just like took like a little sleep. So I've slept about 3 hours today. Yep.
You didn't have time to sleep like during the day?
I slept for 3 hours during the day.
Okay.
Because I had, as I told you, I had like a meeting or two today.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Well, welcome back to life. So here's what this episode's going to be, folks. First off, I think it'll be a fun episode. One, because Mark is going to be loopy, so who knows what he's going to accidentally let slip and say that he shouldn't, and he'll later regret. But secondly, I was trying to think about, you know, what are we going to talk about today? Because there's not too much that has happened. There was a drawing that occurred yesterday, but other than that, there's not been a lot. And then I was looking at the League of Legends subreddit, my favorite place ever, and there was a big old thread up at the top of it because, you know, it's a Monday and it's time to talk about LCS dying. Or quote unquote dying. It's a extreme version of it. And this thread said, if LCS is ever going to get revitalized, we need to remember how LoL eSports and even got big and popular to begin with. My opinion is that LCS should lean into a more community-driven grassroots feeling and drop the delusions of grandeur of trying to emulate major sports like NFL. And there's a bunch of stuff in this thread, both in the original post that I agree with and a bunch of it that I disagree with. And then in the comments, there's even more that I agree or disagree with. And hang in there, Mark. It's going to be a great episode.
Oh, yeah, we're doing it. Ugh.
And so and these conversations occur all the time. And every now and then on the show, we'll get like one call that's like, oh, the LCS needs to move to Chicago. If it just moved to Chicago, everything would be great.
They should just undo franchising. Just unwind those $10 million contracts.
Undo franchising or stuff like one of the comments in here that's really high upvoted is like, publishers should not be involved in the management of their esport, which I just think is so yeah. The second top comment is from Barrington12. Back in the early days of esports, capital E space sports, apparently, the games that really hit it off and became the biggest games, CS:GO, StarCraft, etc., all grew up naturally with very little developer interference. Those days are pretty much long gone now. Any new esports title is basically forced as an esport, space capital S sport, by the developer who wants the total control, and they live and die based on the ineptitude of their developer. For example, everything esport related that Blizzard has ever laid their hands on. And there's just a bunch of comments in there too that talk about how like you don't want developers in there. Developers ruin everything. People here that are like, oh, developers are at odds with the esport, etc., which I really disagree with. But like, oh, their incentives are different, and I think there's a lot to talk about in all of this. And my buddy Mark, as cognizant as he is right now, is going to be a person that I want to discuss this with. And then I think, so we'll have a brief discussion about all that. And then we'll also take some calls from all of you on it. And this episode might end up being closer to the hour and a half mark rather than like maybe 2 hours because, again, like, I don't know. I don't want to just drag the show out and make a not great show because we're like, oh, it has to be 2 hours. But That's where we're going to be. We'll see how it goes. Oftentimes I say that, and then these episodes end up being great. So, and then I also have some updates on what I'm going to be doing at Worlds, which I have not talked to Mark about yet. So he and I can have a discussion about that. And yeah, there we go. So, Mark, I first want to shout out Alienware for sponsoring the show. We'll talk more about them later. Secondly, Mark, I want to ask you what you've been doing this past week besides living in a weird temporal paradox.
Baldur's Bait. I've been playing that. I'm up to 160 hours on my first playthrough. My quest log is shrinking, and it's not going to get bigger. I'm coming towards the end. It's getting down to like the last couple character quests I need to round out before I do the big finale. It's probably top 3 games I've ever played. It's so fucking good, and the writing and a lot of the Act 3 reveals. I know you're not there. I won't say anything, but what a masterclass of writing, and I can't wait for you to get there so we can talk about it.
I'm about 40 hours in. I was just playing it before the show started, and I'm in the Underdark. Because I was told that I skipped the Underdark and I need to go back and do it. And I just did a whole thing with I won't say, this is the only thing I'll say, a forge, which you can probably fill in the blanks on.
And you smash something with a forge?
Yeah. So that's what I was doing just now, but I've been really, really enjoying it. The funny thing is, I shouldn't say that. I've been really enjoying it, but I took a 5-day break from it because I forgot to hit F5 and I lost about 45 minutes of time. And that is one of my biggest complaints with the game, as great as it is that it just does not autosave often enough. And if you're just like zoning out, doing your thing or whatever, and you forget to hit F5, then something goes wrong and you're like, why?
I'm launching Baldur's Gate now to see how many saves I have. I think it's well over 1,000.
Well, they cap the quick saves in the settings. You actually have to go in and like change it so that it goes beyond like 25 or something. So you get like 25 quick saves and 25 like auto saves or something.
That might have been patched. I don't know if that's still true.
And people in the chat are telling me. I mean, I looked at it literally yesterday because people in the chat always say this thing, which I'm seeing right now, which is like you can change a setting to have it auto update more regularly. No, you can only tell it to keep more auto saves or quick saves. You can't.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear when it autosaves, like a big story thing's about to happen. It's a bit of a tell. And other than that, it doesn't do it. And there's plenty of like minor story things or just quests or combat encounters where you're like, well, fuck me.
Yeah.
It definitely doesn't save as much as I want to. I would say I'm a save scummer for like 2 reasons. One is like I really just like clicking the bad options sometimes and seeing what happens. You know, like role playing wise, it's just not my character or playthrough would do at all. So like, it's safe scumming technically, but like at the same time, fuck it. I just want to experience this game fully and completely as much as I can the first time before seeing all the variations. You're right. There's only 25 actual saves in there, but I have saved 1,081 times.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, you're much better at hitting that than I am. So anyway,
I'm so fast on the F5. Anytime that there's a dialogue choice where I'm like, something might happen, or because you can save in. The thing I appreciate about the game is you can save literally anywhere.
Anytime, yeah, and I do that. It's just every now and then I forget. And it was a funny thing where I was playing, and then I ended that situation. I rage quit the game, and then 5 days later, I was like, why haven't I played in a while? And I open up the game and I see what has happened, and I'm like, oh, that's right, you mother.
I think I had one of those too pretty early on. I was like, I am pressing F5 every fucking time now.
Yeah.
I think for me it might have been a bug. I think like a quest bugged out, and I tried it again.
Yeah, we'll catch up. I have a funny bug story to tell you. That I was streaming, and it was a 2-hour long stream where nothing happened essentially because of a bug.
On the bug thing, I waited until patch 2 hit before diving into Act 3. And so I can't say how bad it was before, but this time, as I'm playing right now, it's pretty good. There's people complain about like the reactivity. There's still plenty. There's sometimes where you do something, you're like, "What happened, guys?" and they don't say anything. But it makes sense given how big Act 3 is. Act 3 is fucking massive.
Yeah.
And I think the only real bugs I've seen at this point is like just dialogue sometimes doesn't quite match
Yes, I've seen that
where you're
multiple
at.
times. Yeah.
Yeah, so like, you'll do something and then like someone's dialogue will trigger from something earlier in the day and you'll be like, "Huh?" Or like, "You weren't there for that." Or I had one thing where I saved some people and then I triggered the dialogue and this guy's like, "My daughter's dead." And I was like, "Dude, I definitely saved her."
Yeah.
But like it's pretty minor stuff. There's a couple ass encounters. There's a couple like little things that it's like clear Act 3 is not quite at the same level, but it's really not nearly much of a step down.
So the two other things I did this past week that I'll just mention. One, so I hosted a big old thing. I invited Mark to it. He turned me down, unsurprisingly. But I hosted a big old Magic the Gathering Wilds of Eldraine sort of launch party for the new set that was sponsored by Wizards, which was really cool because they gave us a ton of product. And if you go look, you'll see on Twitter. But like, we had a ton of people come out. So Zell, Mark's old collaborator, Zell came out and played with us and had a good time. Broden came down from the celebrity high rope and hung out with us all day and played Magic. We did this at the Illingworth training facility, and we had even some Magic folks come out too, which was really cool. So that was just a whole Saturday thing, and that was a really great time. We had a ton of people come out. It was super fun. Then the other thing I did last week was I saw Mission Impossible, which I thought was really good. So it's
The first one?
No, have you seen the one that's in theaters right now? Dude, it's got, I know you're not a review guy, but like it's got a 97 on Rotten Tomatoes. Like that was the funny thing, is that like I kept checking when Barbie and Oppenheimer came out, and like they were both sitting in the low 90s, and I was like, okay, and then like just crushing them was Mission Impossible. I feel like nobody saw it because it came out like a week before those things, and it got, it just got destroyed by the memes. But it was really good. I saw it with Drew because I'm trying to make use of my AMC Stubbs pass, and I don't know. You're grinning like you're like,
No,
oh.
I just want to reviews. Bottoms has a 94% by critics and 90% by audiences.
Yeah, I wanted to see it, but it's not at the theater near us, and we're gonna go see it on Wednesday because starting Thursday, it's in no AMC's in LA.
Wait,
Like,
Bottoms isn't?
Yeah, I went and looked for I was like, oh, maybe I'll buy a ticket for Thursday, and it's just not available in any theater in LA starting on, at least for
What
AMC.
happened? Did it just come out like 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, it must have just tanked or something like that because they're just flushing it out.
What the hell? It's so good.
Yeah,
That's so weird.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some weird anti-marketing thing with it because I tweeted about how much I like this movie, and a bunch of people, not a bunch, a couple of people were like, "Oh, that movie is like over-sexualized or something, or it's grooming," and I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's like kind of like a lesbian Superbad, like, huh?" I don't know. It was weird. I feel like I must have missed some conversation about this movie beyond whether or not it's a good movie.
Yeah. Twitch chat seems very skeptical, Mark. Oh my God, Joseph Joestar says it looks like a worse Superbad. So,
no, I think it's better at like modern day. I think Superbad for its time was like genre defining and revolutionary. I think this, like, one of the things I appreciate about this movie that I haven't seen before is I've never seen a movie, and I tweet about this, commit so hard to just background jokes, like not related to the scene at all. There's just dumb shit happening behind them in like half the scenes in the movie. Like it's just constant, and there'll be like murals of like. It's like they commission someone to like paint a mural of like some dude. There's at one point like a mascot who just like has a giant horse dildo on it for no reason in the background of this scene. Like it's just so fucking. Oh yeah, Marshawn Lynch is in it. I was like, I feel like I recognize this dude. Who is this dude? And I googled it. I was like, it's Marshawn Lynch. I was like, what the fuck? It's so funny. It's just the characters are great. The writing's great. It just does different things than I've seen. I think that's what the other thing too. So I'm always just chasing the high of something different. I've never seen something commit so hard to just random background shit. That makes no sense.
All right. Well, we've talked enough about non-League of Legends things.
Absolutely.
So here's what I did. So yeah, I could talk to you. Let's just pretend we're on the walk right now, and I'll tell you what this is.
Okay.
We can talk a conversation about it. So here's the world stuff. So after multiple months of being out in the market trying to find a sponsor for like TGI Worlds coverage, we weren't able to find any. The feedback I got was that, unlike Worlds last year, where it was in North America, a lot of sponsors feel weird about getting involved with something that's like in a weird time zone for them. You know, they're like, oh, we're sponsoring this thing that's in a time zone that's like on the other side of the world. Like, like if we care about North American audience, are any of them going to be watching this? Like, what's the deal? I mean, it's. I guess they just don't get that like the VOD content will get consumed this way. But I get the skepticism in terms of like obviously an event, a World's happening in North America is way different than happening in a different region in terms of North American brands. So, what I decided to do is just book. Like, I'm just gonna spend my own money to go over there for like a week with Drew. Which is going to be very expensive. There's a chance that we might be able to sell in like a brand to like the back of those YouTube videos, but it's not like World's coverage presented by, you know, Coke or something like that. It's just going to be like, hey, this video is brought to you by so and so. The same way that it
Shadow
would be for
Legends.
anything. Yeah, exactly. So hopefully that'll offset. Like, we'll just hopefully be able to sell the impressions the same way we were, but it wouldn't be like the World sponsor is this, you know. So to that end, yes, I'm just going to go. Like, the sad thing is I want to go to Worlds. Like, I think this will be the first time that I won't have done, like, I think the minimum I've ever done is like all of groups and then quarterfinals. And this time I am going in for the 2 days of Asset Day. In fact, I'm going to be getting there halfway through the first day of Asset Day. And then I am leaving, I think, on the 25th or 26th or something like that. So I'll be there for the majority of Swiss, but not all of it. So, yeah, it's still going to be really expensive because flying 2 people into Korea and then doing the hotel thing for like 2 hotel rooms in Korea for all that time, it can be pretty pricey, especially if you want to get a place that actually has like internet to upload content and stuff near the venue. But, you know, I don't want to not do Worlds at all. And so, yeah.
I mean, that's sucks, but that's good to hear. I mean, I know that even when you had channel sponsors, the later the tournament went, like kind of shittier it got for press.
Yes.
It's like this weird thing where there's less teams available, and then there's also more people showing up. It feels like for later in the tournament, and you go to like bigger venues, and sounds like it was always a struggle. And I think I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure your Swiss content almost, or like your group stage content always the better, because that's where most of the Western teams are, outside like the odd faker or like whoever wins the world championship one interview you get, but that's like an extra month you have to stay there for that. So I think, you know, knowing the business side a little bit from talking with you in the past, I think it makes a lot of sense, as much as it sucks that you're not there for the whole thing. At least we're in Swiss coverage, because yes. I think I'll have a lot of interesting questions, or like I think a lot of fans will have interest in how it's going and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think the Asset Day stuff is always really fun because we'll be able to do some sort of like surprise test content there. The other side of this, which I do want to address because I already see it in chat where somebody says that or buy more Magic cards. There's this kind of weird, like, I don't think people really think through it, because I am going to go to some Magic events during Worlds. And I think people think like, wow, Travis is wasting his money going to Magic, or he's wasting his money on Magic or something like that, when he could just be lighting that money on fire, giving us coverage for free. And I wish that people had a better understanding of, like, when I go to Korea, especially if we don't have a sponsor, I'm just like going to be pulling from my personal savings account to create that content and losing money on it, which is like fine, you know, and I understand that not all content that I make is going to make money or whatever, but it is a decision where I'm going to be like, okay, I'm just going to spend, you know, $5 to 10 grand going and covering this on my own as sort of a because I care, because I do fucking care about League of Legends and all that stuff. But just because then I decided to go to a Magic event where, by the way, most of that stuff is covered by the event when I go to it because I go as like a guest. That does not mean that I'm like, oh, Travis is doing this instead of Worlds. Well, yeah, because if I asked you if you wanted to go blow a ton of money, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, it's just not the same. And so it's just kind of frustrating because I don't think people get that. But I just, because of the nature of this stuff, they don't get it,
Mm-hmm.
So it is what it is. I know you do
like
that for all
sometimes.
That.
No, I started reading that Reddit thread.
In preparation. Okay, fair
enough. One thing we skipped over is Starfield. Is it dog shit or the best game ever played? Neither of us know. Neither of us has played it.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Thank you for sidetracking us into that. That was really important that you said that.
I just know, since we're talking about like all the relevant things, Starfield is one of them. I'm gonna play, I swear, and I'll probably not like it because they just don't have space in a space game.
Yeah.
Anyways.
But for those of you who do want to help offset the costs of Worlds, subs during September are cheaper. Wow.
September, everyone's sub.
Yep.
It's time for all you subs to come out of the woodwork. No DOMs tonight.
Okay. Yeah, he's on a different show. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of this thread, because I think it actually does hit on a lot of what. Thank you, everybody, for we'll shout out subs in a second. I see you guys all subbing right now, and I do appreciate it. So let's talk a little bit about this thread between the two of us before we, as a means of priming the pump on people who want to call in. But is there stuff in this that you see, Mark, or should I hop in here?
You can start off. I saw a thread that started the day when it was number one on the subreddit and kind of read it, and I'm going through now as more people have filled in. And like you said, there's like a lot of things in here where I understand where the sentiment's coming from, but a lot of the suggestions are just not great. But I think that's what's good about a show like this, is being able to like say, hey, I see where you're coming from, but this isn't this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, for instance, there's a lot of people in this Reddit thread, or a lot of discussion in this Reddit thread, and I'll try to remember to link this in the description of the show, but somebody comment if I forget to, because I often do.
Put it in the third box. It's our guest for the evening.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. People are not going to be able to read it in that third box, but I'll try.
That's who's speaking when we're responding to text.
Sure. So I think that one of the things that I'm seeing in this thread, for instance, that I don't know, the text is all weird.
Get this QR code out of here. What the fuck is this?
I don't know what it is. I think it's just Reddit. Reddit's fallen off. But it's just a platform. I get so much random shit on my feed now that I don't care about. It's like old school Amazon, where you'd buy a TV on Amazon and then it would be like, things we think you might want. 5 more
Another
TVs.
TV.
Yeah. Like, it does that so often for me, where like it'll be like, you like League of Legends, so here's like a Dota, the subreddit thread that you don't care about.
Well, stop using the redesign, first off.
I mean, it's the algorithm, I think. It's like the feed, not the...
No, that's not how my Reddit looks. You're using the new subreddit. You got to go back, opt out of the... If you go to like the settings, preferences or whatever, and you go to...
Sure. Well, I mean, this is like a browser source in the... Anyway, whatever. Who cares? So,
whatever.
One of the things that I see in this a lot is like, oh, there used to be all these tournaments where all these teams would duke it out all the time. Like, that's kind of at the top of the thread, and I'm like, guys, that's literally what the LCS is. Like, all these constant events in NA where TSM, CLG, Dignitas, Curse, etc. would duke it out. Sometimes up-and-coming teams with lesser-known players would do upsets. This is how Wild Turtle first gained prominence in the scene. Like, all that can be said about the LCS. And so there's just a lot of where like, oh yeah, all these teams in North America play each other. And sometimes these other teams would end up upsetting them. Like, one, I think that's already kind of what the deal is with the LCS. And I I can understand the idea of like, oh, maybe we need more splits or maybe we need more tournaments. But quite frankly, I feel like LEC tried to do that this year. And I know this is going to be controversial because it's been controversial the whole year when you and I have been saying this. But I think the LEC format was a bit of a flop this year. So I kind of disagree with the idea that like more splits or more tournaments would be good.
Yeah, their format changed so much at once. It's hard to identify everything. Like there's portions of it that I think worked very well. Like eliminating some of the weaker teams. On the one hand, it really sucks that you get like 3 weeks on a single patch, and if you had just like start out slow, you're just dead in the water. Like for example, in Spring Split, we just never would have seen Golden Guardians. Like if it happened in NA, just because they started without their main roster and just died. Like there's a lot of things like that I don't love about it, but it is cool that you get like best of threes and best of fives and the format's changing. But then they have all their split finals in the studio until like their finals, and then they have championship points and like a bunch of things don't matter. Like G2 wins summer and they still don't auto qualify for Worlds, and they have to play another tournament which they win anyways. And it's like, yeah, didn't we just do something to prove that G2 is the best team? Why are we doing it again? Like there's so many of those like little problems. I think like the overall idea might have legs, but there's a lot of like, there's also the breaks, like that the actual scheduling of the format had a lot of issues. So, the LEC format is a bit. I'm glad they did it. It's a really interesting experiment, and I think if you look at like the actual numbers, it holds up pretty well. But I think there's been a lot of discussion about it from fans as it went on, because I think the luster of like the new thing that it was in spring kind of wore off, and you had to look at the actual ramifications over the course of a whole year, which was always what I said more than anything, was that not that I liked it or that I didn't like it. It was that like, I'm going to withhold my opinion until I actually see it play out over the course of the year.
Yeah. Although you and I were real skeptical, and I think that's what made people.
Yeah, my skepticism was actually more about just like the repeating of the formats. And I think if I'm going to own my shit, like I don't actually think that was the biggest problem with it. I was concerned about, you're going to see the same thing 3 times. I didn't realize some of the other problems that came up, which like we already just said, that the breaks, I wasn't aware of how many breaks they had. I wasn't aware how pivotal championship points were. I knew they had them, but I didn't realize that summer winner didn't actually just auto qualify for Worlds and stuff like that. There's like a lot of those little things I didn't realize, which, those things could actually be cleaned up relatively easily. Or not relatively easily, but like you can keep 80% of what this idea is and hone that last 20% more. Maybe it's better next year. And it sounds like, based off what their commissioner said, that's what they intend to do next year.
So why don't we, rather than going through the whole thread, there's some bullet points here, and I think you and I can both do quick reactions to them. Thumbs up, thumbs down type deal. So this is what fun. This is what Weedwick is proposing in this post. Bullet point 1: be willing to totally rethink what LCS and NA LoL esports is. The current way isn't working.
Thumbs up. I agree.
I think tentative thumbs up. The thing is when you say totally rethink what LCS and NA LoL esports is, I don't know if you and I feel the same way as to what they're saying. Like, I think they think, let's go all the way back to a time when there wasn't LCS and there's all these tournaments or whatever. But we'll see.
Well, I mean, the sentiment, sure.
Sure. Okay.
That bullet point on its own, I think we actually both agree with.
Next up, change the format completely, move away from the NFL copy system.
This is like a what to me? I mean, a lot of these bullet points are just like, they're just kind of fluff right now. There's nothing specific.
Yeah.
It's not really a copy of the NFL system other than like best of ones on a day. But like the NFL only plays once a week per team. We play 2 to 3 times a week. I don't know. It's just a reference, I guess. It's not that similar. Yeah. I don't know.
So that one, I'm up with, some sort of change the format, I guess, but I don't.
Yep.
I just don't. The challenge for me is I think I've yet to hear of a single format change for the LCS that I think is maybe good. Next up.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say like the NFL format thing. Someone else in Twitch just said like the playoffs are totally different. Like NFL doesn't have double round robin. They don't have elimination, double elimination. They don't have 8 teams out of 10, or they have 32.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, anyways.
Next up, shorten the seasons and open the possibility for domestic tournaments.
Oh
I
boy.
assume they mean shorten the splits, because when you say shorten the seasons,
Oh yeah. I think in their mind you would play out a tournament and then you would have room either before or after MSI or something to um, just play like a IEM type event.
yeah. I think the challenge for me there is like, if you have to figure out how to give these tournaments some sort of stakes, because if you if you have a split and then you have a finals at the end, and then you have some sort of domestic tournament, which I don't know what that is, but like, let's say it's just sort of like the Disguised Toast thing is theoretically a domestic tournament, but I feel like they want something more like an IPL.
Yep, definitely.
Like, what are the stakes for that? Because one of the challenges that you ended up having when they had this in the past was like, players give a shit about Worlds, right? Like, if you just have like a random tournament between now and Worlds, one, it's confusing from a how does this matter, and two, like, teams are probably not as interested in doing this, especially if it's like just domestic. Like, it's very confusing to explain what one of these tournaments would look like.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one where I don't see how it would work because you're talking about just about LCS. Like what made IPLs and those great back in the day was the fact that was like the tournament. Like every top team in the world would go to those, or at least like the majority of the top teams in the world. And what makes the open bracket system work is the idea that you're going to be watching basically the highest level of competition. And as soon as you step away from the highest level of competition, usually the viewership tanks. And this is like a thing in every esport, you know. You can have interesting different tournaments, but they have to have the best talent. So like Home Story Cup for Hearthstone, or Sea Story Cup, or any of those kinds of ones with StarCraft and what they've had back in the day. You know, it's like you still have a lot of the personalities and influencers and stuff like that are like considered A tier or S tier or whatever. And like you can maybe do that with just North American talent to like make a fun domestic tournament. But I definitely don't think you could find any level of stakes that you're talking about where it has implications into the broader year. You'd have to find some like novel approach to it.
Yeah. Yep. So that one is kind of like a thumbs down for me, I would say.
Yeah, I'd put that as like basically a thumbs down because it sounds like, well, I mean, we'll talk about this broader post in a second, but let's get through the bullet points.
Integrate tier 2 teams from NACL into these domestic tournaments. This supports the pipeline to LCS and creates a stronger connection between NA community and LCS. This thumbs up on. Yeah.
Thumbs up for sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think you could do something really interesting where you have for the team, like for teams that do not make it to Worlds and do not make it to MSI, you do some sort of tournament where they play against these NACL teams. Again, the challenge is, like, I don't know what you do in order to give the stakes there enough to make the LCS teams care, but I think you could do something interesting there.
I definitely agree. I think there's some room for, like, in proving grounds, the teams that don't qualify for playoffs get seeded into that. And maybe you can make like some weird gauntlet, like as teams get knocked out of playoffs, they have to play here. I agree that there's potentially a lack of incentive for the LCS teams to act like final bosses in like tier 2 type situations, even if there's no promo relegation. Because that was before why you cared. It was like, well, I get to keep my job. Yeah. I don't think you would have that incentive now. So I think it would just be like some sort of cash prizing. You know, I can't think of anything else. And like, I think the tier 2 people will be very incentivized to show off what they're worth. I don't think any LCS player wants to go and lose publicly. So there's like at least some level of motivation of just competition itself being there. And because this isn't trying to like seed into Worlds or anything, I think you could find a situation where like even if the LCS teams feel a little demotivated, it's like, okay,
yeah,
I don't care. You know, like I want to show off the NACL talent. So yeah, fuck it. You can be a little demotivated.
Okay, we got two more. We got one more. You have franchise obligations, so ensure that all franchise orgs have a ticket to these domestic events. You can still keep the shorter splits as franchise only, and by extension also have MSI. So that's kind of more of the same that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah,
but we're gonna get into calls here. But overall thoughts on this post, and then I have one quick thing about the comments.
I feel like this post is a lot of chasing the glory days. And I think the top comment on this whole thing is like, the ship has sailed, to be honest, on something like this. And that's kind of where I land. Like, I'm not going to tell fans not to dream or like imagine, you know, alternate reality where Open Circuit had stayed and LCS never came into existence. You know, go for it. But at the end of the day, like, we are where we are right now, and you have to come up with realistic solutions and changes that can happen. And I think the idea of like domestic tournaments bring back the rival, like, to me, what this says, especially like when you get, because the bullet points, so there's a common thing in any area where your consumer, your client, your customer, their feelings are valid, and you need to be able to parse what they're feeling from their suggestions, because oftentimes their suggestions don't match with like the guts of an industry and how the industry actually operates and blah blah blah. Here, you know, I think this is what matters most. All the constant events where NA teams like TSM, CLG, Dignitas, and Curse would duke it out. Sometimes up-and-coming teams would have upsets, like Turtle, first game prominence. TSM was the dude bro fan favorite. CLG was the arrogant pseudo-intellectual squad. I think what this person's missing is like connectable people and stories for teams. I think they are feeling disenfranchised with the revolving door of players, the faceless, personality-less organizations that they might be feeling. And they're just going back to what worked in the past without like thinking about the current future. And that's even the title of the thread. We need to remember how LoL esports got big and popular to begin with. I mean, part of the other thing that made LoL esports popular was that League of Legends was the most popular game in that time period. Like, everyone played League of Legends, and like,
and massive on streaming platforms. I mean, League was always #1 by like double, like 2x.
The biggest streamers were all League of Legends players, and specifically North American League of Legends players. There's still plenty. Like, League of Legends as a category on Twitch still does very well, but it's predominantly non-English speaking streamers that carry that category now. There's still Tyler Ones and people who get good viewership. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the same as it was back then. And just being like, oh, we'll just go back then. It's like, well, the scene was carried by the biggest popularity, biggest influencers in gaming at the time. You know, not there were still plenty of shooter people as well, but like the biggest streamers were all League of Legends streamers. And that's just not the case anymore. So going back to these like personality driven teams where you have this connection, it's like it's a different ecosystem, and it wouldn't work even if you did just like try and go back. But what this person is feeling is disconnected from teams and players, and that's what going forward the ecosystem needs to fix, I think.
I'm on Twitch right now. You can't, from what I can tell, you can't even like rank the game.
Did they get rid of it entirely? You used to be able to.
You can go to games. You can go to like browse, and then you go to games, and it shows you recommended games. But then it just shows you a bunch of
viewers high to low.
Yeah,
and then tag language English. Gosu is at 5.6.
No, you can look at. I'm saying I want to see where the games are. Like, so I can see League has. You can't rank all the game streams.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
you can. Viewers high to low. Just chatting, Grand Theft Auto, League of Legends, then Valorant, Starfield, Roblox.
I can't find
Rainbow Six Siege.
I believe it exists.
Old man navigates the internet.
Oh, sort by. Oh, here we go. Here. Okay. No, I somehow clicked over to a different, like the browse tab. Maybe they're doing some sort of A/B testing or something like that. But instead, I was just seeing a bunch of different like things. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Hey, League, by the way, beating Val right now. All right.
Dead game.
Val, dead game.
Hold on, let's pull up some esports. Let's talk some shit. Fuck Valor. No.
Okay, so wait, listen. We need everything we can for this episode. The one last thing before we hop into this, Mark, what do you think of the big pushback on? Okay, Weedwick, the OP, commented in the description or in the comments. It's a nightmarish, hellish landscape. Now that the developers want to control esports. On the surface, it doesn't seem so bad, but there's a deep conflict of interest here. For a developer, esports doesn't exist for the sake of competition. It exists for the sake of marketing and advertising the game. This means all decisions made by the controlling entity will be to maximizing the marketing value. It goes without saying that this doesn't always align with esports for the sake of esports. Like, there's a bunch of other stuff in here, but I'm like, well, first off, CoreJJ just showed up in the chat.
Spawn and CoreJJ are here, so
Spawn says, I agree with Mark. CoreJJ
says, scrims just ended.
Yeah.
Wait, why are scrims over?
Are they even scrimming
12 to
right
3,
now?
4 to 7. I
Dude,
assume so.
I don't think anyone's scrimming right now. Are you kidding me?
I assume that they are.
Who are they
practicing.
scrimming?
They have to go to Worlds in a month. They haven't gone to Korea yet, I bet.
I mean, I think
So
Yankos or the Yankos. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on, but I don't think they're scrimming. All right. Anyway, back to this. I just think of the irony of, for a developer, esports doesn't exist for the sake of competition. It exists for the sake of marketing and advertising the game. I'm like, listen, MLB and NFL aren't, and NBA are not sitting there being like, we do this for the sake of competition, and we will only optimize for the competition. I'm like, no, that's not what they're doing. They're optimizing for ad revenue and viewer engagement and all that shit. Like this sort of fairy tale land where like somewhere out there exists some like non-profit organization that is going to optimize esports for the sake of competition. It's
well,
crazy.
even like they reference IPL and MLG, like those were still capitalist. Like they were trying to make money.
MLG had done a ton of fundraising rounds and was never going to be profitable. From what I'm sure there's a ton of MLG people that'll disagree with me, but like I don't think it was ever going to be profitable, and that's why Blizzard ended up buying it out eventually. And IPL, like IGN, killed IPL, not because of Riot or anything like that, but just because they're a media company, and I think the media company got bought. And I can tell you, as an expert on working at media companies, those things are never stable. So the idea that somewhere out, if Riot had never gotten involved, we'd be on IPL 27 right now, is crazy to me.
Yeah.
So.
I think that there is some truth to the idea that like a developer controlled ecosystem has flaws and problems. I think the idea that they are not pushing competition is actually completely wrong, in the sense that I think that the matches that Riot makes are, from a competitive integrity standpoint, way higher than previous open source tournaments. And like open tournaments had problems with prize pooling. People didn't get paid for months. Like I know people look back at those glory days from the fan perspective of having an enjoyable product, but streams were worse as well. You know, like if you take off the rose tinted glasses, you had like hour-long delays between games randomly, which almost never happens these days. It can happen sometimes, but almost never. Yeah, players didn't get paid well. The competitive integrity was just complete ass.
Dude,
like
Sundance,
people remember they A-rammed the finals.
Yes,
game 1.
I've thought about making a video about that because I feel like it's funny. Sundance, speaking of ARAM, when Sundance, who was running MLG at the time, back in like, I don't know, 2011 or something like that, and League was thinking about going to MLG, or like their MLG was interested in doing League stuff. Sundance's take was that the League games were too long, and that he really thought that the audience should be excited about Dominion, and that was going to be the future of esports for MLG.
Maybe it should have been. You don't know. Fucking Riot took control and said not Dominion. They headshot Crystal Scar because it was too popular. It was doing too well.
Oh my god.
People are saying that
you say that shit, and the scary thing to me is that that's like probably how a lot of people. There's always people who are just do this revisionist history thing.
I mean, people are saying that like part of that jank was charming, and I totally agree, it was. But that's also because at the time, that's all there was, and you endured some of the jank because it's like I love Dark Souls 1, but it's jank as fuck in a lot of ways, and like they've refined the formula since then. And people don't remember when LCS started, even before franchise, because we forget there was also a period of time where there wasn't franchising still, and it was just LCS, was controlled by Riot, but it wasn't franchised, and people were really excited, and it was awesome for a lot of time before cracks or whatever started to show. So like, I think if you try to do it again, you would get a lot of the old problems, but now you're used to living in an ecosystem where games happen on time. And like, speaking of competition, like Riot has really strict rules about like what patch you can play on, and like making sure the game is balanced. You don't play on live. The people talk about League of Legends esports being a marketing tool for League of Legends. True, but if they actually wanted to market the game, they would play on live. There's like no reason to delay it for 2 weeks behind all your favorite streamers in the game they're playing on. When Briar comes out, like they should be having a fucking tournament where Briar comes out if they wanted to like maximize selling things. And like they don't do that because they do care a lot about competition. So,
ask a Smash Bros fan how happy they are that their developer doesn't give a shit about esports.
Yeah, seriously. Like the money's way lower for players. I'm sure all those Melee guys are really bummed that Nintendo hasn't stepped in and made a proper circuit for them. In fact, they tried to, and the whole thing blew up in their face because Nintendo just fucked them over left and right. And I guess that's their form of their developer stepping in, which if that's what it's going to be, sure, hands off is better. But yeah, it's like it's a disaster for some other situations.
So Mark and I have talked a lot about this Reddit thread. We've talked about a lot about our stuff, but I think we want to use this as a launching point to kind of talk, and we'll do our best not to just shut down everyone's takes and be like, meh, moving to Chicago is dumb. We might do a little bit of that, but I do think it's interesting to hear from folks on what they would like to see and all that stuff. So obviously we've done a lot of preamble in this episode, but Mark, you want to start pulling takes from the subtopics and pleb topics chat? Some ones we can rule out already, I think, because we've talked about them a lot in the past. I don't want David Shynock to come on and talk about how the LCS needs to move to do live events in arenas every 5 days and travel the world, because we just fundamentally disagree on the cost there. I think we don't need to talk about how LCS needs to move to Chicago and everything will be better. Or geolocation. We've talked a lot about geolocation previously. Yeah, Papa Smithy says he's clipping this right now for a swear. So true. Anytime you can't, even when we shut him down, he's just like, it's free real estate, and turns it into a TikTok or Twitter. What any other things that folks want to talk about? Mark, am I forgetting any of the classics?
No, I don't know. I'll be looking out. We'll see what pops up. I'm going through the channel right now.
Yeah. All right.
Give me
while Mark is doing that, I will read out some subs. So first off, thank you everyone who just dropped a ton of subs. I saw a bunch of people do that when we were talking about costs of worlds and all that stuff. So thank you to Reaper, Casey Clark, Mr. Croc, Mr. Dr. Enchilada, Blue Jay, Luna Bear Kid, Skylimix, Director Donut, Smoke Dog, Shadow Spectre, Salmi, Count Cucula, Racefel, Stealth Blackout. Oh my God, Xfix, wait till the last week of the month, you'll save yourself money. Zemelkai, Spartans, Vimstrike, Roxas as a hoe gifted 2 subs, Snitzel, Tamain, Shammy KC, Dasher 7777, X Happy Faces, Sportsnut, Xpix with the 20 gifted, Mad Hog 98. Thank you for the Prime. So thank you everybody. Xfix, very very generous of you to drop those 20. Really appreciate it. So
I'll get the first person.
Yeah. Off he goes. Thank you to everybody who's helping directly helping to offset the impact of worlds on my personal savings account. And listen, when you're in your 30s, you can't be doing too much damage to your personal savings account. KAPPY is here. KAPPY, where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm calling from Fresno, California.
Fresno, California. And what do you want to talk about on the show?
So I think Riot Global should introduce a policy where players can only switch major regions once per every 2 years. So if they're playing in a minor region and like NA wants to pull them up, then that's fine, and then they can go switch somewhere else. But if they're playing in a major region, they can only switch regions once, and then they're locked in that region for 2 years. Whether or not they play, that's, up to them, or up to the teams, I guess. But it will make players really think twice before, fucking off and going to a different region for, one split.
So you've clearly watched the show and listened to it often enough to know exactly how to pull on my heartstrings. But
this is the Travis Gafford caller. I pulled him for you.
What I usually try to do in these situations, whenever I think about Riot instituting any policy, is I think about how this could be abused by teams, usually, because that's usually who abuses it, but also sometimes by the players themselves. And I think my concern here is once you bring a player over here, then you just have them kind of stranded. Like they have to. You've burned the bridge. You've not, maybe this is too real of a thing, but it's like you're essentially taking their passport, right? Like they have to stay here and work, and at that point in time, you can kind of put them through the ringer, which I think is. I worry that it would give teams too much power in that relationship. You could then kind of countermand it by saying like, okay, well, then you have to put some restrictions where the team has some sort of guaranteed contract that they have to put on the player, where like the player's contract is guaranteed. That way they don't come over here, and then the team doesn't do some sort of like, thing where you're where you're bait and switching them 6 months in and telling them actually your contract's going to be a little less. Or I think then the challenge is then you give the player too much power, because then they have some sort of weird guaranteed contract. So I like the spirit of it, and I'm not saying that maybe that's not the solution, but I'm curious if you have any answers to sort of the weird power dynamics and weird situation that you're doing with the players, if they end up stuck over here.
I don't, and I kind of just wanted to put this out into the world because I've been thinking about it a lot, and I know it's not a perfect solution, but I think that both teams, but majority players should have to think twice before they make a commitment to join a different league and then just leave, after a split or two.
Yeah. We had on our call, on this call, or maybe it was in the Twitch chat or something like that, but I vaguely recall talking about this with Mark. The idea of like you're sort of putting it on the onus on the player, right? Like if the player comes over here, they have to commit.
Yes.
Mark, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is the greatest, I think, call-in take we've ever had. Not you, this other guy, sorry. Your take is good too, but this person's suggestion was the first time a fan said something where I was like, you are a genius. And it was that the teams have two import slots that they assign to a player for 2 years. And if you dump that player still has your import slot for the length of time remaining. So they can go join another team anywhere in North America while they have this North American slot assigned to them, and it only goes back to the team after 2 years.
That could have been me on Twitter. I may have DM'd you.
Someone also, I swear to God, was on the show talking about it before.
Oh, maybe.
So, I mean, maybe other people, a bunch of people have had the take as well. It's not necessarily the most novel, like no one's ever thought of an idea. But I think this is a great one, where it incentivizes teams to think really hard about who they're going to sign. And once they have them, being kind of forced to keep them and invest in them and make it work, or they can let them go, but they don't get their spot back instantly. This way you're still keeping the like 2 import rule clause, but you're just making it so that teams can't just churn through people within that import spot, which I think is the bigger problem with, like, I know Papa Smithy's in chat right now, but for example, Vikla parted ways right now. It obviously wasn't working, so I don't necessarily blame him for like that's a bad move, but like you took a gamble, you took a shot. You assigned
I think Balulu is out of IMT as well.
Yeah, Balulu or whatever. It's like you guys can take your shots. That's fine, but like we're not going to punish the fans necessarily. And I think there'll just be more incentive for NA talent if you're talking about a Balulu versus an Ablaze Olive, or a Quid versus a Palafox. A young, I don't know. The difference between a young tier 2 player in North America versus other regions suddenly becomes a lot bigger, because it becomes a lot more of a risk to try and sign that kind of person. And so it's less about punishing FlyQuest for reaching for a Vikla and more about kind of just the assumption that like, hey, I don't want the NA guy, I'll go get the other guy, because then you're actually going to have to commit resources, like real resources, not just money, which is like at the end of the day maybe not as different. It's like you're building blocks of the future go away. It's like draft picks. It's because we don't have a draft, but this is something where teams can effectively have to really make it work. And I think, you have to really think about the implication of this, make sure people aren't like signing and trading players. Like,
well, that's what I was going to say is maybe you just you can still maybe keep the rule of like, hey, you can only have 2 import players on your team. But if FlyQuest wants to bring in another import, maybe they have to trade with another team for one of their import players, right? Vikla goes to another team, and then that allows, if Team Liquid wants to trade Summit or something like that over to.
Right. Yeah. You couldn't just buy 4 people's import players and stick them all on your team because now the import. There's still also the restriction of limited per
Right.
players.
Yeah.
Someone in chat says, "How does this solve the LCS viewer problems?" Well, as Travis has said, and as this post in that kicked off this conversation is talking about, is that there's a lack of connection between fans and a lot of the players in the LCS because, as Travis has. I don't even fully agree with Travis that this is the biggest problem, but it is definitely one where there is a high rate of player turnover, not just in terms of this player is now on this team, but also this player is now out of the league. Perks, Alfari, Vikla is the latest one of these kinds of like import players who show up for a year, maybe don't achieve everything that they had in mind, and then they leave. And the fans are left with like, why Takui? But I cared about him. He had an incredible story. He's gone now. Okay, I guess that's fine. Whippo, Inspired, sure. Like you can, like there's an endless slew of these names. It's not that there's anything wrong with any of these players, but it's really hard to ask an NA fan year after year after year after year to like learn a new person's story, decide that you care about this person, and then watch them walk out the fucking door every year. And so this would be a way to protect against that by trying to limit the amount of churn that can happen from non-domestic talent, because at least domestic talent stays in your ecosystem.
Yeah. I think that I really like the system. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that Riot should do is address this, and I don't, quite frankly, I still don't know if they know that it's an issue, and I don't know how they don't know that, but it's just maybe a level of obliviousness. Kappy, thanks so much for the call. Anything that you want to shout out before we go on to the next caller?
Yeah. Thank both of you guys. Shout out to both of you guys for putting out amazing content. I've been, watching for a long time. Yeah, I really, really enjoy you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And shout out to Golden Glue. Congrats on winning a title. It may be tier 2, but I'm still super happy for him. And shout out to Alienware. They have some amazing deals right now. Just really checking them out, and they have amazing deals. Yeah, last but not least, shout out to the TV show Shoresy. Everyone should go watch that.
Okay, right. Very good. Thank you.
See you guys.
Catch you later. All right. I think we can do another call before we take a break. Mark is already grabbing them, so thank you to let's see, Madhog98, Renz LOL, Eben Crux, and Sovereign Khan. Caller, welcome to the show. What's your name and where are you calling from?
My name's Spencer. I'm calling from Denver, Colorado.
Denver, Colorado. And what do you want to talk about on the show?
I want to talk about a problem and then what I think the potential solution is. So I think that a lot of viewer burnout in LCS takes place because of the fact that we are the 3rd or 4th place region competitively. NA tsports fans are used to their teams being the best in the world, even though that's not always the case. We think it is for the NBA, the MLB, NFL, golf. I mean, there's a lot of sports where we championship over everything. So when we see our NA LCS being the 4th best league in the world, we just stop wanting to watch. It's the same thing that happens when my T-Sports teams aren't doing well. I take a season where I don't watch every single game. I think that the best solution is to stop trying to be so competitive and to focus more as an entertainment product rather than a product of competition. So I want to take Spring Split, which doesn't even matter, off, and have teams do interesting matches, whether it's like Nemesis Draft, or their owner has to come play support, or they get up from their keyboards when they're dead and they walk over and mess around with their opponents. Just do something interesting for me in spring so I can watch LCS as an entertainment product. If I wanted to watch competitive League of Legends, I would watch LCK VODs.
Huh. All right, I will let Mark dive in on this while I turn up the AC because I think Kobe turned it down. I'll be right
back. Travis dodging this take.
I will answer.
So there's part of this I agree with and part I don't. I think it's true that North America is not the shining jewel of League of Legends gameplay. And I think if you are trying to make your identity, hey, we're the best region in the world, come watch us, that doesn't really work. I've seen, obviously like LCK has insane viewership, not because I think that they make a drastically better product, though I think, they do have really cool stuff with their like intros. And I like how they had like just like a shitload of people on their prediction graphics. They do some cool stuff. I don't want to say it's like not good, but my point is just like, it's not the content that makes that like one of the most watched broadcasts, and like T1 having fuckloads of like they're the most viewed team in the world. It's not the broadcast that's doing that. It's the players in the team and the quality of gameplay and the region as a whole. It's like the fact that they are in this ecosystem that makes them so interesting to watch. And you don't have a faker corollary in NA. It was kind of Bjergsen, not to say it skill level wise, but like, hey, he was the best in the region and blah, blah, blah. But point is, I agree that like having something else you hang your hat on other than we represent the pinnacle of League of Legends is good. But I don't think you can go full clown fiesta, because people still enjoy a semblance of competition, even if they know they're not watching the best in the world. I know that might not be your take, Super Spender, but I do think there are a lot of North American fans who still want to watch their region. And they would be very put off by only games that don't matter for fun.
Here's where I'll
leave the competitive for summer is what I'm saying. But sorry.
Yeah, I hear that, but I'm saying like a lot of people will just not watch spring then, because they'll go, yeah, this doesn't matter. You're telling me it doesn't matter? Great, I won't watch.
And I don't know if they'll even watch summer, because if you've just taught them that like there's just a bunch of goofy shit happening, because like spring is a long time, right? You're talking about like, I assume you would not have a team go to MSI.
I think you could start at spring playoffs, do like what essentially lock-in used to be, just do a bracket straight up, pick a team for MSI based on that. You don't need the full split. And then from MSI, you go into summer where it's more competitive. But I don't care about MSI either. We send one team and they don't do well.
I mean, the idea that spring doesn't matter is like, I don't even agree with that, to be honest. It's your highest viewership split. Spring in every single region in the world is the most watched. It's higher than summer, because it is the start of a new season. It's all these teams' first time playing together. There are a ton of storylines. There's a ton of things that people come in excited for a year of League of Legends. And if you started off on the wrong foot, that's not a good idea. I think, you can try and make things more fun to lean into the fact that it is a new format, or it's a new, here are the new items or something. You can only play new champs. Or like, I don't know. You could incorporate fun things, but it couldn't become the whole identity of the broadcast, because a lot of people still think spring matters. And like MSI is still interesting. MSI had millions of viewers. Like it's, something that I think players want to compete in. The players themselves, like you have to think about the entire ecosystem, not just like if a fan would like it. Because even if you're right that fans would love this, players would not be excited to just like fucking not play the competitive thing that they need to play before they go onto MSI. Like I don't think they want to do troll matches.
There's two things here. One, yeah, I don't think you can just do a bunch of troll matches the whole time. I do think there are some arguments to be had that maybe you could have a shorter spring split. You start spring split later. It doesn't start in like the beginning of January, because I do think that the LCS season is maybe a little too long. But I think you could start it a little later. I like lock-in. I think there's a world where you do something that's a little bit more in line with this disguised toast thing, where you have some sort like lock-in, instead of just being lock-in, is actually some sort of streamer influencer-led event. Like let Ludwig, let disguised toast, let, back in the day it would be Tyler One, though he's somewhat persona non grata these days, but let them have some sort of streaming.
Sorry,
everything okay? Work?
You're good. Cat fever went off. It's done.
Let them do some sort of fun thing, because here's the thing: all these teams have to get 20,000 visas anyway. Those all get delayed. And that was one thing I think Lock-in was pretty good at, was like dealing with the visa delays, and then kick LCS off for real in like the middle of February. So I like the idea of doing the tournament thing, the like sort of more entertainment stuff in spring. The other thing I will push back on, Mark kind of pushed back off on the idea that spring doesn't matter. I'm going to push back on the idea that like we lose viewers because we don't perform well internationally. And I think that you can 100% say more people would watch LCS if we were winning all the time. But I do think that like Riot has already designed an international system that is fairly irrelevant to North American viewers. Last year we had, for the first time, in years and years and years, an international event or international tournament that was at a time where North American viewers could watch it. Like this year, we're back to times where North American viewers can't watch. I think that the North American viewers that want to watch these tournaments are already watching for LCK and LPL because they're already carrying and watching LCK LPL stuff. And I think that like we are like this sort of idea of like, oh yeah, you know, we're catering too much to the idea that like LCS is competitive and we're leaning too far into that. Like I think that ship has already sailed. People know LCS is not competitive. The tournaments happen at times where people can't watch them. The people that do watch it are already the hardcore people that are going to watch it no matter what. Like, I really just don't buy it. And I get that, like, there's 5% of the audience that sits there in the comments or in Twitch chat right now and goes, oh, I fucking care. Yeah, I just don't think, like, they're representative of the average LCS viewer. Like the average like the people on our Twitch chat and YouTube comments are way more likely to be up at 2 a.m. watching an LS co-stream of an LCK game than like the average person who we want to watch LCS. So I don't know.
I think we're slightly different. I think international performance does matter quite a bit. I think there's been pretty clear correlations between good international performances and viewership. But I also think it's like not something you can rely on, or it's not something that's under your control. And like you need to be able to find a product that people are happy to watch, regardless of what your teams are doing internationally.
Are you talking about LEC?
Well, I think LEC, but then also like there's a player base plus success question that, you know, like I don't know the answer to, but like, hey, what do you know? The best teams, the best regions in the world are the most watched. Huh, weird. You know, like, and there's a pretty clear ranking of, you know, how good people are doing internationally.
Or the best player regions of the world have the most players. Who would have thought?
Yeah, that's what I said. There's a bit of a push and pull there, but I also don't think that it's, you know, purely
I agree that we would potentially have more people watching the LCS if we performed better there. I
think you get more international viewers when your league's doing better for sure. I think that you have a domestic fan base that you have a loyal domestic fan base that'll tend to watch no matter what. Yep. When you put times to be for more EU fans to watch, EU fans aren't going to watch if LCS is less competitive than LEC.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying it has to be like better. I just mean it helps. There's storylines, there's narrative things, there's all these things that like doing good internationally helps, but it's not the end of the world. And as Papa Smithy put in chat, you know, like CBLOL has better viewership than the LCS now, and they're not doing they're on weekends. Worse. Yeah, they're significantly worse than us on the competitive stage, but their viewership is going strong. So what's going on there? So obviously there's complex things. Something else from chat. Jack was talking about doing East versus West tournaments in spring. Sign me the fuck up if you can make that happen. Because as far as I'm concerned, LEC spring or winter, whatever they called it, was like kind of irrelevant anyway. So like, yeah, let's just fucking run a East versus West, or excuse me, a NA versus EU tournament there for fun. Like, I would love some more rivalry stuff. I think that's a great pitch in terms of if you're like, so I think Super Spender's general idea is like, hey, let's bring some of the fun back. Let's bring some rivalry, some like fun stuff. And I think that's a great way to do it. Would be an East versus West tournament where both teams agree to have a compressed spring split and spend a couple weeks at the start of the year doing some like international tournament. Obviously, that the thing is that cost goes way up when you start housing 10 teams from other regions. I think maybe instead what you do is like a micro season that leads to an international tournament that's just between East versus West, kind of like a Battle of the Atlantic.
Did you know that you can do these like I think it's less of a thing now, but for a while it was a very popular thing to do like house swaps where like a family in France would come and take the house of the family in New York, and they just like swap. We just do
send
that.
5 LCS teams to Europe and bring 5 LEC teams.
I mean,
here.
that's the way I would do it, right? And you'd have these two. You'd run like a month-long thing where Saturday is broadcast out of Saturdays and Sundays, or maybe Thursday, Friday is North America, Saturday, Sunday is Europe, because that's what Riot loves. And you have the five teams. They're almost like separate leagues or whatever, or separate things, and you do some sort of finals where like the best of the best from both sides meet up against each other or something.
The logistical payments of like rent and like food and like all these things start getting really messy, but I do think like these are the types of fun ideas, less than like, hey, we're not going to play a competitive game mode, people are going to like press each other's keyboards when they die. Like, I think that stuff is like funny once or twice, like in an Earth Invitational like Riot used to do in NA, or like a show match, but I don't think you can do consistent things like that. I think you need, if you want to get creative, I'm super down to get creative, but I think it has to maintain this core of competitive integrity, because otherwise people tune out because it's not esports anymore. It's shenanigans.
Caller, thank you so.
Let me just say my closing statement.
Sure.
So Bill Hader, the comedian, said that if someone tells you something isn't funny, they're probably right. And if someone tells you what would be funny instead, they're probably wrong. So I think that I was on track with spring is wrong. We need to do something different with it. But, my ideas weren't the best. There's other people out there who are smarter than me. Let them come up with something interesting for us to do for the first few months of the year.
That's fair. But I liked what your conversation did, was it spurred, like, okay, maybe you're too far in the for fun stuff, but what is also fun but also competitive,
Well, yeah, I also like just like going, let's go to the logical extreme and walk it back from there.
Yeah.
Like we all agree that you shouldn't have a month-long tournament where people can press each other's keyboards. What's the less extreme version?
Yeah. Hey, caller, thank you so much. Do you want to give a shout out here at the end before we take a quick break?
No, thanks for letting me get in that final thought, and you guys have a great night.
Yeah, thank you. I see that Maximus Payne is knocking Bill Hader in the chat. I love Bill Hader, and what's funny is that I've seen that interview where Bill said that, and I also, it's so similar to what Brandon Sanderson says, which is like when you're getting feedback on your novel, if somebody says it's not playing well, that's great, but don't listen to them if they say, and instead these characters should do this, or here's how I would fix it. It's like, just listen to the part where they say it's not working and then figure it out on your own. All right, we're going to take a quick, wait, Mark, we're taking a break.
We're taking a break.
Wake up.
Twitter.
We have an ad to read.
Hurry up.
Hurry up, Jesus Christ, this man. Okay. Shout out to Alienware. Really appreciate Alienware. They have been a fantastic partner for us on the show. They have an amazing notebook, the M18. We're going to be bringing it with us to Worlds and be working on all of our stuff off of that. So thank you so much to Alienware for providing us with the hardware and gear that we use. It's just been a fantastic system for us as we've wanted to grind out some amazing footage and such on the road, particularly because of the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4000 series GPU that is in it. And if you'd like to go check out the Alienware M18, I've been harping on it for months, but I know it's been fantastic. People have been telling me that they've enjoyed it as well. Go check it out at alienware.com/Travis. Purchasing through alienware.com/Travis actually does directly support the continuation of content creation here at TGI, and we love Alienware as a partner. They've just been supportive of us for years and continue to do so. So I just really want to give a huge shout out to them, and thank you to for sponsoring Hotline League. Again, you can go check out their products at alienware.com/Travis. Doing so really does help support the show. So thank you to Alienware for supporting esports, as Jack says in the chat right now. Thank you to Alienware for supporting esports. We love to see it. All right. Let's go grab the next caller. Thank you to Alienware. Thank you to everybody shouting them out in the chat. Really appreciate it. And thank you as well to Sovereign Khan, Morigami, Spud Tugger, and Coinshot Quoth in the chat. I really like it. Oh, shout out to Olivia Rodrigo, by the way. new album, Guts. It's available now. BB, where are you called from?
From the UK, man.
From the UK. What do you want to talk about on the show?
Pardon?
What would you like to talk about on the show?
Okay, so I think the LCS needs to go to best of 3 so it's 2 reasons. Not only does it make the competition better because the players will improve, but I think it just opens the door for more sponsorship because of visibility goes up with more games.
All right. Here we fucking go. All right. All right. The best of 3 battle or discussion has been around for ages. And I think it's one of those things where it's never going to be satisfied because, look, viewership tanked when they did best of 3s. But over time, over these years, the best of 3 enjoyers have evolved and developed more copiums for why it didn't count, really, that the best of 3s brought viewership down. And they say things like, well, Overwatch launched then, and Overwatch, a lot of people went and played that, and that's why. Or, well, there were 2 streams, and splitting the streaming wasn't great, and that's what the problem was. Or, I don't know, there's a list somewhere. I don't have all of them, but the best of 3 enjoyers do. And I am not a believer in best of 3s from a viewership perspective. I realize they are successful in other ecosystems. So I'm not saying that they can't be, but I think in North America, where folks have not been trained to watch eSports a couple of matches a night, that's just not, I think it's less feasible. And I think, listen, maybe I could be convinced of this in a league where people are attached to the players and the teams more, where there is a scramble for more games and for more, and people care about their team so much that they really want to watch them play more. I don't think that is where we're at in the LCS right now. I think we're in a situation where we have to convince people to care about these players and these teams, and we do, and then eventually those players go back to a different region, and then we have to do it all over again. So, in my opinion, creating even more saturation of a league that people are already, I think, having a hard time caring about is the exact opposite of a solution that makes sense.
One clarifying question to BB first. When you say it'll have more airtime, does that mean you want a second channel or no?
I want a second what?
A second channel?
Oh no, you'd still stream it on like the LCS Twitch, no?
So are you
BB
live more days then?
Yeah, I would say so, right? You just live more. You're live more often. It's easier to get sponsorships if you have more visibility, no?
Right, but you know that you have to pay more then as well because you have to pay all your contractors to show up and turn the lights on and run a 50-person production, which is a day of the LCS.
But you should be making more as well if you're getting more viewership in and
theory,
getting more sponsors in.
In theory, but what if you're hypothetically? I don't know if this is true or not, but what if you're operating at a deficit already, and while you do get more money, you also then have to spend more money?
It's for sure a good argument, and I think the whole topic of conversation is to fix. So let's say they are operating a deficit. The whole thing is to find ways to make it so that they're not, and to make the more profitable. And yeah, you're putting on more shows, but if putting on more shows is making you more money, then you're not operating in the red anymore.
I worry that your strategy is, for every $5 we take out of the register, we put a banana in the trash can. For those that understand that reference.
Well, no.
I think the other thing too, to get into the real world a little bit, is what do you do when it's let's say a pending economic downturn and sponsors hard pull out, and they are really penny pinching on what they decide to sponsor, and let's say your league's viewership's going down, so you don't have tons of negotiating power. Are you sure turning the lights on more is economically a good decision?
I think in that universe, it's definitely hard. But if you're just going to assume that the LCS is always going to go downhill, then there's nothing you can really do, right? But I think
Well,
currently,
sponsors don't give a fuck about where they're more about, you know, like what the numbers are currently, and the trend that it's on. I mean, I personally believe the LCS will go back up at some point, but
we can only hope.
I can't sell them that.
No, it's true. But I mean, okay, so I've been like a diehard LCS fan my whole life. I've been watching basically forever. So take this in the nicest way possible. The players are not good, man. Like, they're not good. Like, compared to the international stage, it's just so hard to get invested and to get people who aren't like already integrated fans to come over and enjoy. And like, I don't want to flame anyone, right? But you see someone like Fudge just dominates everybody. Like, he's by far one of the best players in the LCS. He hard gaps every single top laner. And then he goes to Worlds, plays against Zeus, and it looks like Zeus is playing against a fan on stream. Like, it's not close. So how do you get people to be like, yeah, come and watch Cloud9. They're so good. They're not champions currently.
So wait, you tell them to you then instead just triple the amount of games that they're going to be playing?
Yeah,
like
to make the players better. Because then you'll just improve with more games. And
is
it's not
that
even just
true?
about...
So
I mean,
this
it
is
has to be.
Why?
It doesn't. So this is always been something that I wanted to believe, but I just don't think it's there. The idea that, you know, if you play more on stage, you improve more than playing scrims. I think that means you're really bad at practice. You know, like if you were gonna want to learn anything in the world, the best way to do that is like not just taking a test over and over again. Like if I was gonna build a chair and I didn't know how to build a chair, I probably wouldn't want to start the process of building a chair by just straight up trying to build a fucking chair. I should probably like learn how to like make pieces that go together first and like, you know, hone my skills. And like there's just no basis for the idea that like improvement happens best by just like hard spamming the actual thing that you're trying to do. Like if you want to learn music, you don't just go out and try and play Stairway to Heaven until you can play Stairway to Heaven. You'll like learn things and improve and then hopefully get better.
These players can play League of Legends. They're just not very good. So it's like if you wanted to get better at building a chair, instead of building one chair a week, you'd build 3, right? And
right, but Olivia Rodrigo didn't take guts and just be like, I want to do a whole new album. And so then she went on tour and started playing all of those songs. She instead went into, you know, the writing room and recorded a bunch of stuff and developed it over time. The whole point is that if you want to get better, maybe not just, you know, like practice is a great way to get better, and you can hone your skills in certain situations. You can try certain things, not just grind out additional games on stage.
Yeah, so that's ultimately the problem. I think people are saying, you know, there are improvements you can make on stage. I absolutely agree with that. I think like there's things that your team's going to do on stage that you don't do in scrims, and so there's a healthy balance that you need. I think the idea that best of threes, because what you're also saying here, BB, is that you're saying also take up more days. Anytime you take up more days, you're going to lose scrim time. And that is not necessarily conducive to improvement. There's incentives to win now if you're playing on stage versus like improving it better. Because you have to do well in the standings in order to make it to the playoffs or whatever's happening in this supposed bracket that you're making. And so if you're playing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, your scrim partner is going to be playing different days because you're probably not playing every single day or something. But, you know, like there's more uptime, so there's just fewer opponents to pick from. Maybe it's not as good of an environment. Who knows? There's also this thing that we did before, which is we did go to best of threes for a year or so. It was like, I think we came in 2016 summer. We started it and we went through 2017 summer. I believe it was 3 splits of it.
I think
and
it was
guess
splits.
what?
Yeah, 3 splits.
I think it was 3 splits of it. And guess what? And Europe did this too, actually. They went to best of twos. They experimented with best of twos. We did best of threes. Neither of us did any fucking better internationally. We did it for over a year. We ran this experiment and it didn't fucking matter, is what it ended up being. 2016 summer was not one of our most competitive years. That'd be 2018, which was after best of ones. And then 2019, which is when Team Liquid did the best it ever did, was also after best of ones. That's also G2's best ever. I believe that was all best of ones for them as well. They would have
won Worlds if they had best of threes, Mark.
Oh, you're right. My
They choked for his FPX because they didn't have enough stage experience after grinding out all year long, you know?
Yeah. I think best of threes, listen, if you want to tell me that best of threes are more interesting to you, and you want to make the argument that you enjoy watching best of threes, you enjoy watching draft adaptations, you think that there's a point to be made that optimizing uptime with your best teams and having to bite the bullet about having more uptime with your worst teams is better in some way because it keeps
I don't know. Maybe you can argue this somehow, right? Like, but I don't think the competitive angle is the way to go. And I'm not sure the financial one is either, because I don't think it'll, at the end of the day, super sway the needle on like sponsorship revenue. If you want best of threes, I think there's a case to be made, but I don't think it hinges on the 2 points that you've been using.
Like, I can tell you, BB, here's a small. We've been doing bad analogies. This one's bad, but not as bad. If we made Hotline League 4 hours, our revenue would not double. In fact, it would not move very much at all, right? And so, but I would probably have to pay Mark twice as much. And so I would actually probably end up losing money, or maybe losing more money, depending on the night.
Okay.
So
this is also another point. You guys have spent a lot of time talking about like players building fan bases and growing to like a player or whatever. So if you take someone like Yike on G2, when he plays things like Belveth in Italy, he's like so much fun to watch, and he gets to do these things, especially now in the like playoff LEC format, like against Fnatic, where they were able to like take Yone mid on caps because they can afford to drop a game, right? But when you've got these best of ones, you've got like a jungler who maybe is like super good at Kha'Zix, being too afraid to lock in Kha'Zix, because if he plays bad one game, it's over. Like, that's a loss on their record. So he's like scared to pick Maokai for his job and like the security, right? But if you're playing these best of threes, you can risk the Evelyn. You can tell your jungler like, okay, you're good at champs like
the
Belveth.
same argument was used to get rid of relegation. And while I think getting rid of relegation was a good thing, I think people think like that didn't really end up playing out that way. And so I'm not sure if that's how it would work if we did it this way.
I mean, I think there's some truth to like, you know, in playoffs, you see a game one, sometimes people are willing to try crazier stuff. And I do think there's also times where you get like a download on your opponent. Like, actually, here's one of the real reasons I think series have more draft flexibility is because you're spending that entire time prepping for that one opponent. And you're working in a much more constrained practice environment. This is one of the reasons practice really matters, because I don't have to generally practice the fact that I'm playing against 2 or 3 opponents that week. And I don't need to play Renekton, Ornn, blah, 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 whatever the 5 meta tops are in case 3 get banned. I need to pick one. I don't know what this guy's going to do. And plus I have another match tomorrow as well. If I'm playing one match a week against one specific opponent, I get to craft my game plan around that fucking guy. And you get to see more flexibility and picks and things like that come through. As well as the fact, like you said, that there's more chances against that one person. So instead of playing against that guy one time, you play against him at minimum 3 times if it's best of 5, or 2 if it's best of 3, right? And I think that's where you do have some credence here, which is if you limit the amount of opponents you have to play in a week and you play against that one opponent more times, you will see more adaptation over the course of a series. And I don't disagree with you there. And I think that's one of the things where, again, if you want to make a case for best of 3s, this is a good one to make. I think this is better than the competitive angle, because I don't think there's any proof of that. Like, it's a nice idea, but I don't think there's any proof that playing on stage more actually significantly improves players compared to just being better at practice. So like, I think there's a lot of things you can do to make the draft more exciting, and I actually think best of 3 is one of them to make drafts more exciting generally across the season. But I don't think you actually want to increase the amount of opponents people have to play in a week, because then I think you start getting the same problem where people have to start practicing a lot more generally.
Caller, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything you want to shout out before we go to the next caller?
I do. Shout out to T1. They're my boys. We've had a rough couple of years, but I feel like this is our time.
Very good. Have a good one.
Take care, guys. Bye.
All right. We got 3 more callers to go. I think this show's turning out, a little bit more dynamic than we were thinking. It's been fun.
It's been miserable.
Okay. Thank you, Tom Shu, for the 58 months. Really appreciate it. We've got this is our year to choke in finals, says Dr. Professor or Sergeant Major. All right. Caller is here. Caller, what's your name and where are you calling from?
Yo, my name is Zextrap, and I'm calling from New Hampshire.
Zextrap, what do you want to talk about on the show?
So I believe my take was basically going against what you said earlier in the show. The point about developer-controlled esports versus what the MLB and NFL do is that in the MLB and NFL, it's a 2-party agreement, specifically with the focus on the competition as the product. and the two parties being the teams and the players, versus what esports is, which is a three-party system, and that's between the developer, the teams, and the players. And the focus isn't really on the revenue from the competition itself, but really from the revenue from the game, because the competition is just marketing for the game. And I just want to say, like, the take that you read from Reddit kind of reads like a recent essay written by, I believe his name was Avi Puyan, who's the
Oh yeah.
Ovi, yes.
league ops guy. So, and he basically says the same thing in terms of the incentives of esports essay, and it kind of reads off just like that. And I feel like he also didn't really do justice to the take, because I feel like in the end he doesn't say that he wants just IPL 5 and MLGs, but that he wants a mix of IPL 5, MLGs, or these kind of passion tournaments, as well as Riot's tournaments, because Riot's tournaments are really cool for stuff like Worlds. But if that's all you get, then that's not really the best. But I don't know.
I think our point, just on that last one before getting to the meat of the topic, is more that it's really hard to have both if you want both, because the Riot tournaments end up being the like creme de la creme tournaments, and everyone has their domestic leagues that are also operated by Riot, and getting everything on the same page and leaving room for third party like one-off tournaments that don't feed into Worlds and the bigger ones becomes really hard to get the best teams to go to them. I think that's more what we're saying is like, you know, it's possible you could have an IPL 5 in this day and age, but it would need to be like fully open circuit if you want to do something like that. And you know, that's probably just not going to happen.
Okay, I guess because you guys were just shitting a lot on about like Riot and our IPL 5 being about profit and like not really. I guess I don't know. That's
well,
fine.
we were saying that part was more that it just wasn't economically viable back then. As much as we all love those tournaments, like yeah, I would fucking want IPL 5. It's the greatest tournament ever, arguably, but like it wasn't like that thing was going to fold. And like Travis's point about MLG was like that was, in his opinion, not economically viable long term. Whereas at least like with developer support, the developer foots the bill. Whereas and it's not making money, but at least like the developer's getting advertising, right?
That's what I kind of want to get at here is zextrap. Like let me ask you, because this is maybe where I have failed to understand from that Reddit post the argument. What do you think it is that what is inherent about a publisher or developer being involved in their esport that you think is bad, that actually that is detrimental to the esport?
I mean, so I'm gonna like kind of just copy a lot of what the League Ops guy says in the essay, because I also read it.
Ovi, I know him very well. But yeah, continue.
But I mean, he basically says that like based on the revenue that esports, LoL esports in this case, makes is minuscule compared to the revenue that Riot makes from the game itself. So their focus should be on making sure that the game continues making revenue rather than the esports getting better. Like I think we've talked about a lot of things, and I believe there's a call coming up on this, so I won't talk on it too much. But like certain things in esports, it's like, you know, gentlemen's agreements is something that happens in COD, or like other things like in Hearthstone where certain cards are banned. These kinds of things to make the game more competitive. If you were to take real life sports, for examples, it's like there are some arguments made that in the WNBA, the hoop should be smaller so that you can have more smash dunks because those are way cooler. It's like these are all these like little changes you can make to make the product more entertaining, the product better, sell more, and make the product the key rather than making sure that for Riot in this case, the esport is equally representative of the game itself, because they want people to see the esport and then play the game, buy the skins, and get their money. You see how like there's a difference in incentive.
But that supposes that if Riot wasn't involved, that like the MLGs and IPLs of the world could make changes to the way that the game works to make it more esports friendly. Whereas like I worry we'd end up in a world where if developers feel like they don't need to be engaged at all on the esports side, you don't even get them building out features like spectator mode and stuff like that, right? Where like things that are required for the nature of the sport, or balance changes that are balanced for the esport, you know?
Yeah, I think I somewhat agree with the idea that like the NBA's product of basketball, they can tweak the rules to make it better. And like LCS can't 100% do that. Like I don't think there's anything stopping Riot from making a fearless mode for their esports if they want to, or like introducing things to make it more interesting. But it is true that like the core of the game we can't change. Whereas like the NBA sometimes is like, what if it's a 12-foot rim? And everyone's like, what the fuck? You know, like that is under their control. There's definitely more control. But to Travis's point, while I agree that is a notable difference between the two ecosystems, I'm not sure why a third party organizer would solve those problems unless that's outlined somewhere in there that I'm missing. I'm gonna read this whole thing. I just haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure I'll post it in chat after the link for it. I think it's a pretty good read. Talks about a lot of things that I think interesting. But I guess specifically what I would say is that right now you have most recently we had this fight between players and teams with the LCSPA and the NACL stuff. And there's like a third party, so you're like, okay, where does the blame go? Does it go 33% each ways? Does it go more on one side than the other? Versus in a two-party system, like let's say there was just the 10 franchise teams and they actually just owned the LCS, and then they would make whatever rule that would be most beneficial for them to make profit, versus right now it has to be, okay, Riot also has to make a profit with these rules, and the teams also have to make a profit with these rules, and the players also have to make a profit with these rules. So that can kind of come up screwing over some parties versus the others. I obviously don't have like an answer, and I think, I just thought that when you guys talked about it initially, it was not giving enough credit to the idea that there is actually a divergence of interest between in a what do you call it, like Riot controlled esport, where like they actually don't care as much about the esport as the actual game itself. And for an esport to actually be successful, long-term, generational, and like a mainstream thing, it needs to have that kind of focus on esport as the product itself.
So let me just dive in really quickly on all this. So one, I agree that a major issue at every game publisher is that that their primary product is not the esport. I totally get that. You see it time and time again with Riot, where they are pushing updates so often that you get constant bugs and pauses in the game. If they cared more about the esport, I think they would probably push updates less often or release champions less often because of the sheer amount of bugs and stuff like that, where they don't promote the esport as much as they possibly could, where oftentimes, like I know just in knowing esports people that there's a lot at Riot, that there's been a lot of times where they wanted to do something and they couldn't because they couldn't get resources, because the resources were like for the game were focused on the game, not on the esport. Totally get that. I don't understand, I guess, and we don't have time. Could be a whole episode or something like that. But I don't understand how that changes in a world where Riot is not a party to it, right? Like I get how in traditional sports it's different, where you have these two parties, but I don't like. Baseball doesn't need a developer to support it. Basketball doesn't need a developer to support it. When you're talking about software, you need somebody who's like actually handling the code to do all this stuff. I guess you could point at Smash or something like that, where like it's just a locked game, or like StarCraft, where there's not updates, and you could say like, well, and then those things are just there. But it doesn't feel to me like those games are massive. It feels like Riot's involvement in League has been beneficial overall in a way that like Nintendo's absence in Smash has not been. I think the other thing is like when I look at the teams in the league, and I know we have some team owners in the chat, so I apologize for saying this. Like, I don't wish that the LCS was entirely run by these 10 teams. Like, if that had been the case, we would have had the NACL and Academy system leave far earlier than it did. We would have had the import rule lifted completely. You would see way more turnover than you have right now. And there have been instances in other esports where teams have just run in a league entirely by themselves, and I don't think that has necessarily been like a better product. Like I don't look out and see some product that's being run by like 12 teams that's a league and think, wow, that's so much better than the LCS. And so like I think this, people are going to call me a Riot simp or whatever, but like I really don't see a world where like having esports publishers and developers invested in the esport is worse off than having them not invested.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, there's downsides and upsides. Like, you don't get Worlds as it exists right now without the developer footing that bill. Like, giant arena with 3D dragon flying in, and here's JChow and this KDA thing that they're premiering at LCS. Like, the idea that there's no developer support and that like Riot doesn't care about the esport is just not true. When you see like, okay, well, they make balance changes explicitly around League of the esport. Like, a lot of patch notes include pro-specific changes and tweaks and things like that. Like, there's a whole debate that actually Riot cares too much about the esport, that they balance things too much around the top level of play and should be balanced more around the normie. Like, I've seen that conversation actually a fair amount as well. So like, there's a lot of effort that goes into the esport and a lot of resources that get poured in, where in a environment where you don't have Riot, like you're saying, and the teams exist all on their own and they just run their own little league with their own like siloed out version that like maybe Riot handed them, and like, here's season 13 patch, you play on it for a year, maybe until MSI where we have a mid-season update or something, like, I'm not quite sure, if that would actually be a better product for fans. Is it? Like, what does it do better in that case where you say it's like the because like there's tons of problems in these other the games that you're talking about too. It's not like NFL and the NBA are this fucking fairy town where everything's great. Like, yeah, I love watching my teams who have no chance tank. I fucking love watching them just int their whole season for draft picks. That's really cool. In luxury tax, oh yeah, so we have a sale. We have this tax thing, but people just fucking ignore it. And all the biggest teams the best teams in the region in the world are all from the biggest markets because they can afford to actually pay and keep their players. Like, there's a lot of problems in these ecosystems as well that you can make cases about. Now, they make successful products. Their revenue deals are fucking huge. They make more money than us. And I'm not saying that like Riot's better than this or anything, but I just mean to say that there's a lot of there's other problems in other ecosystems as well. So like, I'm not sure, like, I can acknowledge the things that come up because the developer controls the game. But even to Travis's point about like, oh, they tweak the game. It's like, yeah, that keeps interest high actually. Like, people like watching new things. Like, seasons in video games like Path of Exile will pique players and players will watch things. So changes in games are actually usually good for player retention, and siloing it on a single patch is actually bad. And so actually it's good for the esport that the developer updates the game. Competitively, you can argue that it's annoying for players to have to play this fucking much to stay good at their craft. That is very annoying. I agree. It does not feel good for the pro players, but you know what they get out of that? Hopefully more money, and they're compensated for it because there's more people playing the game than if they just stopped touching it and updating it, 5 years ago or something like that. Like a Melee, which people talk about having long legs. Sure. But the scales are different.
This also, like, the confusing thing to me about this is we have esports where the developer is less involved, like CSGO, and there is a third party in all these systems. They're called tournament organizers. Like, the ESLs and folks of those worlds are a third balance of power that in this situation is just Riot because they are the tournament organizer. But like, there's just, zextrap, I really do appreciate you coming on the show because this is one of the better conversations we've had, and I think you're doing a good job of defending maybe the Reddit thread that we were maybe strawmanning a little bit at the beginning of the show. But I also just am like, there's so many things that I think people don't think through whenever they think about a conversation around like, oh, Riot's involvement is just like an anchor around the neck of the sport, like, which is, I know that's not what you're saying, but that is, I think, what the tone is of some of these conversations. And I'm just like, do you like when MLG used to charge people for 1080p access and pay-per-view of these events? Like, I know there's this big movement now where people are like, oh, Riot made this all unsustainable and we should go back to pay-per-view. And I'm like, dude, in a world of like free Twitch streams, there's no way that you're going to get viewership to be good enough to support this. People are not going to go pay $10 a month for like a. I know some people would before you comment, but a lot like you would not get to a sustainable point for these esports off of things like that.
Or you would get it to a sustainable point, but it's diminished in terms of like what it's offering you.
Right. So
I guess my final question, zextrap, for you is like, and I need to read this whole article to see, what the overall takeaways are, because I think that there's plenty of differences worth noting. And like Travis said, we could spend the whole episode talking about the knock-on effects of all these different things and how, like, we have Riot using the esport to push the game and the esport being propped up by the game, and like, are those a conflict of interest and these sorts of things. But I think the question that Travis and I are left with is like, what is the supposedly better alternative and what does it give you? Because I'm not super sure about that answer.
Yeah, I've kind of, I think, you guys, it was interesting because you guys brought up a point that about like buffs and then like argued against it. And I didn't really talk much about it. But I think what I would say in response to your question is like, and the article kind of talks about this, is a company has a lot of ways to market their game, and esports is one of them. Using content creators is one of them. Putting it on billboards or Twitch ads is one of them. So I think for esports to really stay and to gain strong power in a negotiating table with the developer and kind of not necessarily strongman Riot, but work with the developer to both further not just the game but also the esport, is for the esport to be big enough and bring in enough revenue by itself that it's not necessarily maybe self-sustaining, but it meets the requirements for like what the developers puts money in it for. So in this case, marketing. And I think that's where I would kind of leave it off with, is that I'm not saying Riot's doing a bad job, and I don't think you guys don't think that either, and I think most reasonable people don't. I would just say that for esports to be a long-term actual thing that spans generations, it needs to be strong enough by itself. Maybe not necessarily as a two-party system, but like in that three-party system, the esport part has to be strong enough where a company like Riot or a large game developer has to see enough benefit in continuing to invest and continuing to kind of also curate their game towards the esports side as well. And I think I'll just kind of give a shout out to a caller that's coming up that's going to talk about maybe decreasing champ pools, which is like, I think, a way that the game esports can shift from something else. But
thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate the call, and thank you for coming on to push back on stuff we'd said previously, because a lot of callers don't have the courage. They just sit in Twitch chat and they say, wow, these guys are so deluded, and they won't actually come on.
Zextrap owned us with facts and logic.
Yes, very true. Thank you so much for the call. We'll catch you later.
Could I give one shout out?
Sure.
Or at least two.
Yeah, you already gave your shout out to the you said my shout out is to the upcoming caller. Right. But I'll give you a second shout out.
Yeah. The first shout out's to 9dots, the biggest Dokla lover. Shout outs 9dots, and the second one to the TSM Apex team. They just won the World Championships yesterday. So let's go TSM.
Nice. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Let's go TSM to another region. You know what I'm saying? Because they're leaving the LCS. All right. Mark, you want to grab the next caller?
Sure.
It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a stupid joke. I'm trying to make like a dad joke. I'd shout out a sub, but nobody's dropped a prime, so now we just sit here in silence while I figure out how to fill while Mark is gone. I'm going to be at MXP Portland. You live in Portland? Come see me. All right. Invictus is here. Invictus, where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm calling from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Charlotte, North Carolina. What do you want to talk about on the show?
Hi, I would like to talk about the fact that Riot has an opportunity to curate gameplay, and that is by adopting a standard rotation.
Wait, this is not what your take was.
Wait, what? Is my take that pro players are stupid and they should know more lore? Wait, Mark,
wait.
Which take should you...
I don't know. I didn't even pull you.
No, here's what
Travis
happened.
Pulled you.
Oh my god, Travis. Okay,
this person's display picture is almost identical in color and stuff from whenever you shrink it down a ton to another person whose take I tried to pull.
What was the take you tried to pull, Travis, first off?
League of Legends as a whole product would thrive if played on the live patch.
I mean,
Holy
it's
shit! Wait, so am I so stupid? Like, is Travis so stupid that he pulled me and he didn't mean to?
Okay, all right. Stupid
Is that what
is not
Oh
the
my
term
God.
that I would use. I just
Invictus
okay.
is also a little rager in chat. So I
I'm
thought
not a
you.
rager.
all right. Let him rage. What's your go? Go ahead.
No.
We'll try this. We'll see how it goes. You've been granted an opportunity.
Oh, I love you both. Okay, so my take is that Riot should adopt a standard rotation. Riot has a better opportunity to curate gameplay in pro play than we understand.
Can
that-
you explain for people who don't know what a standard rotation is? Because I realize that
Yeah.
what you meant now, but you said that in Discord, and I was like, I don't use by standard rotation. You're meaning from the context
Yeah,
of a Magic the Gathering player, but not everyone plays
Yeah,
Magic
that's
the
what I'm
Gathering.
talking about.
yeah,
You
exactly.
might want to address people because not everyone
Yeah.
plays Magic the Gathering. This is also why I thought Travis
Correct.
pulled this fucking take.
I didn't know. I literally meant to pull.
Yeah.
I can't see their name, but I noticed they have like a little red panda. It begins with an M. Twitch or Discord now hides people's names because of the thing.
Anyways,
Yeah. So I'm not a rager. I'm also not a huge Magic the Gathering player. But so the standard rotation is basically the idea that you can only play the cards that were released in the last 2 years. So this is the way that Hearthstone did it: is that you can only play the expansions that were released in the last 2 years. So you couldn't play like the first rotation that was released in Hearthstone. You can only play the last 2 years. And I don't think that Riot should adopt this exact model. I don't think that you should only be able to play the champions that were released in the last 2 years. But I think that they should adopt a model where you can only play certain kinds of champions. And I think that this would go a long way to curating the gameplay that you see at the highest levels. For example, no one wants to see Yuumi. No one wants to see Azir Corki. I'm a top lane player myself. I think that the top lane meta would go a long way if you ban champions like Cassante and Renekton, and then you see a much wider diversity of champions you see in the top lane. And I think that they could do this with every lane, and maybe there's some champions that I'm leaving off, but I think that a standard rotation would go a long way to curating the kind of gameplay that you see at the highest level.
So I think let's say this less than a rotation. Let's say we have rotating champ pools.
Okay.
And so you have a situation where maybe only half the champions and at any given point in time could be picked. I think my question for you, Invictus, is this not kind of what they already have in some weird way where like half the champions at any given point in time are not pickable and then the other ones are, like half of them are
Wait,
not
this is a
worth
good
playing.
point.
So
Well, this is a good point. Yeah, so I think that this actually happened in last Worlds, I believe, where they thought that not every champ was going to be perfectly playable, and then it turned out that Lucian, I believe, was like super OP. I think that the problem with the current rotation that they have where every champ is pickable is that they can make mistakes. Is that they can not nerf a champion enough, and then it becomes, super playable and it becomes a problem in pro play. I think Yuumi is a great example. I don't think they intended for Yuumi Zeri to be like the most, picked combo for an entire calendar year, but it was anyway. So, I think that it goes against the kind of rotation that you're explaining where, only certain champions are really playable. I think that they should just ban champions straight out. No, you can't pick Zeri. Sorry, fuck you. You can't pick Yuumi either. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't curse. Sorry.
I mean,
No,
the,
no, no,
challenge,
no,
the challenge is
you should-
usually these
yeah.
broken champions pop up. Go ahead, Mark.
So no, I was gonna say you're good on the swearing thing. Like I didn't interject because the swear. I had my own take. Sorry, Travis, you go, and then I'll lay down the law.
I think here he goes. So I think the challenge is you are right in that oftentimes Riot overbalances a champion or under whatever you want to say. Something's OP. The thing that occurs when you have these types of rotations in card games or in other things like that is like, oh, we're going to push out some of these old cards so that you can have a new meta. They aren't able, your comparison is more like, oh, we're banning this card because it's breaking the meta. Every deck is running it. Or, oh, we're going to, ban, like if you have a a video game or something like that, where like the developer doesn't support it as an esport. Sometimes they have situations where this champion or this character is just banned in this competitive match because everyone knows it's broken and it's like terrible and nobody wants to watch it. That I think is more in addressing what you're talking about, where like, oh, Yumi and Zeri, or like a new champion came out and it's too strong or something like that. That's a little different than like rotation, right? Like rotation would be like, hey, in January for the next LCS season, you can't play these 40 champions. They're all disabled. And like that's not something, that's usually something that gets announced months in advance and then lasts the whole season. It's not something where you can really be reactive to like, oh, we fucked up and made this champion too strong.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of competitive card games I understand have both. You have what is like your pool of cards, and then like sometimes things get removed if they're just like giga busted, right? Like wasn't Jace like that or something for a little bit? I don't really play the fuck Magic or whatever, but I think
Jace the Mind, Sculptor.
Yeah, whatever. I think the general sentiment behind this is one that I've seen echoed a lot of places, which is that they just want more champion diversity in watching League of Legends. I think there's a concern about doing it the right way, because I think while it's a noble goal to increase diversity, done poorly will really piss off the pro players because they can't play the strong things when they like know they're strong and they're trying, like this is their life, and you're just like changing what they can play willy-nilly on them or something could be irritating. And I think also for fans, you do want to watch the highest form of League of Legends played, and a lot of people are watching esports. Travis, I think you did a poll, and I don't remember, it wasn't necessarily the majority, but it was like 30% or more people watch esports with like one of their attractions being like knowing that this is the highest level of the game possible being played.
Yeah,
and like
we
when
did something like that, yeah.
Yeah, like when Heimerdinger's picked bot lane at Worlds last year, everyone's like, what the fuck is this? And then it's busted, and then you have Heimerdinger's running all over solo queue, and there's always a spike in a champion when Faker plays it. You know, like people see this and they want to do that. And I think if you disconnect the esport from the average player's experience, there becomes a friction that I don't know if Riot wants to dive into. And as well as the fact that I don't even know if fans want that in the end. I think Worlds, you probably don't want these things. I think there's a case to be made that there's a time and a place for it. Like maybe regular season, you get a little wackier and force people out of their comfort zone, so you don't get these like sloggy metas where you can predict the first 3 picks every single fucking draft, and you just want to like bash your head in the wall like you see Casual and LS like gouging their eyes out. Like you definitely don't want that. So I do think there is a good incentive to find a solution, but I do think you have to be very clever about how you do it so you don't bump into that other problem. There's like a sweet spot you got to find.
Yeah, I think the only way to do this is if you do it in ranked as well, where it's actually like the rank. If you're playing solo queue, all 40 of these champions don't exist in solo queue for you. So, because you do need to have it mirror, and that I think is the analogy.
Wait,
Sorry, go ahead. No, you go first. No.
I was just gonna ask a question. So it seems like Mark and Travis actually disagree here. So it seems like Travis believes that if there would be a standard rotation, then it should carry over to solo queue. But it seems like Mark doesn't have that opinion. So like if Azir and Corki are banned in
I
pro
think Mark
play,
is
they should
saying
be
you
banned in
want
solo queue.
the
Solo queue.
competitive experience to mirror the average player experience.
Oh no,
And
I
I'm
don't give a shit
agreeing
about
with
that.
him and saying, yeah, so the way to solve that is to actually do the same ban system in ranked.
Yeah, I'm saying that there's...
Okay.
I'm saying you have to be a little careful with what you do with it. Like a fearless draft radically changes how anyone who plays League of Legends can engage with that esport, because you can't do a fearless draft when you log into the client, right? And it's a cool idea, but it does push the product further away from the average player. Whereas what Travis is saying is like, you're right, so you should actually just do both. I think you can make unique things in pro sports or pro League of Legends. I would say, as an example, as a way to not piss off the players and the teams, let's say you play it on live patch, but the teams at the start of a week could vote, and if 80% of the teams or 70% of the teams said, yeah, fuck Zeri, she's out. And then there's just these kind of global agreed upon bans. It doesn't quite do as much as you like a standard rotation does, which is what you want, which is like really shake up the meta and like force people to rediscover everything from the ground up. But yeah, I think that's a hard one, because like Travis is saying, I think you'd have to implement that on client side as well, make that like a holistic new approach to how you play League of Legends. And maybe it's worth it now that they have 160,000 champions in the game, you know, like limiting that and it can drive sales because like, hey, this is like my favorite champion's out now, and that's like a big incentive for card games. I know, which is like you got to get the new thing, and
What?
you know, there's no way, That's not why they do it, right? It's
By the
totally
way,
not a
after
profit-driven
stream,
incentive.
after the show, we'll be streaming Wilds of Eldraine, sponsored by Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering.
And it's definitely not for money that they've pump out new cards left and right and make other cards irrelevant, you know, because they want you to play new ones. No. But like you can sell the developer on that idea potentially. So I think there's multiple solutions that could work. I think the more radical of a solution you come up with, the more it needs to be integrated into the main game. Yeah,
I agree. Hey, Invictus, thank you so much. We're over time on an episode we thought we were going to go short on, which happens every time Mark and I ever talk about going short on an episode. So, anything you want to shout out?
Yeah, I mean, shout out to my other take, which is that pro players should know lore, and people like Travis and Mark should know lore as well. Shout out to Travis's beard and Mark's hair; it's really great. Shout out to the best ads, you know, Alienware and Tidy Cats. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
What up?
Thank you.
Here's what I'll say as he leaves.
Okay.
I actually love lore. I am actually such a fucking lore nerd. Travis knows this, and Travis is too, with the Cosmere, with World of Warcraft, Dark Souls. Like, I will devour your lore if you give it to me. Riot has fucked me over. I was so invested 100%. In their lore.
100%. The amount of times where they've retconned or they've redone stuff or they have system. That's why like Arcane is now the only thing I enjoy, because like they'll release a champion.
And that's not even canon, as far as I know, right? Like that's not even technically canon for the game.
Dude,
world.
what is canon? Like they have no canon. Like they release a champion and they're like, here's this lore for this champion, and then 5 years later you find out like, oh no, that's not the lore. That's not actually it. And in the meantime, they will have laid off. They've gone through 2 different lore teams because they lay them all off, and then they hire new ones, and then they lay those off.
And this person's like, I have such a better idea. Dude, when Rise started collecting the World Stones, and I was like, is this like Avengers? Is this gonna be like Infinity War? And then I just like, I don't know what fucking happened. You know, like what happened with that? I don't know. I was down for that. And I just can't do it. I just like.
So Invictus is back because Invictus says you guys are dumb as fuck about lore. Drag my ass back in. Drag me back. What do you want, Invictus? Yeah. I'm gonna drag you out as soon as I want. You're on borrow time.
Yeah. So wait. So what did you say about Rise with the world runes? You guys don't even understand like this lore. It's like the most basic.
No, I understood it, and then they just fucking changed everything else around it, dude. Like I bought the physical copy. I bought the physical. Okay, so they totally got rid of the Journal of Justice. They got rid of the actual fact that summoners exist in the lore.
Was that ever canon?
Yes.
That's a stupid part to be canon.
Yes.
Come on.
All right, you don't. Okay, hang on.
So wait, because we were here before you, our old man opinions suck, and we should get reinvested in new lore every 3 years.
Invictus.
They rewrote the lore in 2017 or 16 or whatever, and it's been canon since. Like, you just can't follow the lore in the last 6 years.
Invictus, I'm going to tell you. You are, quote, dumb as fuck about lore. I'm going to drag your ass back out, drag you out.
This guy didn't even know that Journal of Justice and Summoners were lore and canon. He didn't even know. You didn't get him out of here. Get these fucking new bloods out of here. Think they know lore.
He's gone. It's over. All right.
And they have absolutely retconned things since 2016. To pretend that they did like one massive rewrite and then like, oh no, the lore's been settled since then is a joke.
Is Seraphina still like using the blood of dead?
No. They realized that sounded bad. So no.
Dude, they like that's a perfect. When did that character come out again? Like that they changed this shit all the goddamn time.
Bro, like the Darkins and like, oh, here's another new Darkin who's like the scariest thing ever, and like fucking, I don't care.
And like Arcane is
Kiana's
great.
Law got a full retcon. Yeah, like I'm pretty sure they changed Ionia and Demacia as well again. Like I don't know, man. I just can't care. And then like the lore events they put in the client aren't even that good. Like fucking Sentinels or like the dating, like the first dating sim was fine. Whatever, it wasn't canon lore. And then they try to do canon lore, and it's like, what is happening here? You know, I tried playing fucking Rune King and Mage Seeker in these games, and they're fine. But like, nah.
Dude, what they should just. Like here's what I'll say. It is a miracle that Arcane is good. Like that is what is the most impressive thing to me is that they made. I have never seen such an amazing story-driven product built out of the garbage of a creative heap. Mark, you're not even paying attention. You're
I agree. It's just because he's like, this is all canon, and it's like they literally just changed Janna.
You cannot follow this stuff because they change it all the time. So it makes it. Here's what it is.
You can watch Necrit videos every day of your life, and you will be up to date. But you know what? I can also just watch one Elden Ring video, and it will be relevant forever, and it won't ever change.
Here's the thing: they bring the champion lore in, and it's around for like a year, and then they decide that the champion lore is not doing well, so they send the champion lore back, and then they bring in new champion lore. Does this sound familiar?
And guess what? I guess the Janna change didn't happen. Oh, my bad. I guess across the multiverse fractal society of League of Legends and Riot Games, different lore happens in different worlds. You know, like, God forbid there's one canon lore that is the only thing you need to follow. Like, guess what? I don't fucking like Fate Zero Infinity Blade Works fucking dipshit and multiverse thing there either. I don't like that. I like the one. Give me the one lore that's good.
I literally, like, Mark and I will, that someday, if they ever fucking stabilize this shit and create a cohesive canon and teach us that they're not going to change it all the time, Mark and I will be like, we'll have Necrit Jr. YouTube channel, essentially. Because Mark and I only, like, that's our big thing besides this show and League of Legends is we do, you know, fantasy lore, sci-fi lore stuff. And isn't it fascinating how us, the biggest nerds on this stuff, can't do this with League of Legends, our main thing. We can't combine the two, you know? Mark, go grab the next caller. All right. J Mac, thank you for the Prime 16 minutes ago. Yeah, I think it's crazy that people think this. Okay. numiii is here. numiii, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Los Angeles, California.
Welcome to the show. What do you want to talk about on the show tonight?
I was going to talk about LCS Gamechangers, how it's a place for marginalized genders to compete, cast, and observe. But I'm really heated about Mark saying that Fate Zero is not good. So I'm trying to cool off from that for like 20 seconds.
Fate Zero is legitimately one of my favorite anime. I just think that like it's nerfed by the fact that it has to tie into this larger, broader story that sucks.
I've read Tsukihime, so I disagree on that, but moving on. LCS Gamechangers is currently happening right now. It's being played on Saturday, starting at 1 p.m. PST, streamed on LCS Twitch themselves. And I think it's a really cool opportunity for marginalized genders, so not just women, but other genders, to compete in a competition. And I really love the fact that there's 3 teams that are actually kind of working with LCS affiliate teams, TL, GG, and NRG, working with these 3 teams. And the teams themselves are actually like advertising themselves, marketing, they have a whole campaign. It's actually really cool. And I don't know if a lot of people know about it, so I kind of wanted to come in today and be like, please watch LCS Gamechangers on Saturdays. It's pretty awesome.
No, I really appreciate you calling it out. I think we were, Mark and I talked about having somebody on. We haven't done it yet to talk more in depth on it for an episode, and it just didn't happen for this one. But you coming on and promoting it, I think is great. If anything, I've just been... It's actually kind of wild if you compare the Val Gamechangers to the League Gamechangers. I don't think Nas and Needham are ever going to do another interview with me again, but if they did, I would definitely be like, hey, you guys talk about League and Val, you know, both getting love, but like the Val Gamechangers is so promoted and hyped and like talked about, and they just kind of... Sometimes I worry they just do the League one so that they can say they do it. So... numiii, give us more optimism because I'm more pessimistic about. I wish Riot did more here, but you know, what are any of the cool storylines or what's going on? What's interesting?
Honestly, like, if you're just looking at just broadcast talent themselves, Pastry is actually casting LCS Gamechangers. So if you do miss Pastry casting, he is casting on Saturdays. You have 2 other casters by the name of Camcom and Jollycasts. And I think all the 3 teams have really, really cool marketing. And I don't know if this has been mentioned as well, but former TSM Parth, has a company by the name of Sido. And they're actually partnering with these teams to give not only the players, but also coaches and marketing, the advertising team, just a lot of feedback and insight about like, hey, here's how you do a team, like here's how marketing works. And I think it's just a really cool collaboration between Riot, a third-party company, in this case Parth and his company, and teams just to work together for competition, broadcast, observing as well. I think observing is a really like underrated topic that can be spent on something completely different. But there's just a lot of cool opportunities for marginalized genders. And I don't know, everyone's complaining like, oh, I miss Worlds, like I want international competition, LEC is done. Well, yeah, you can watch LCS Gamechangers. And they actually have like a real life finals in LA in the Riot Games studio for free. And I think I just checked tickets, or at least like the seats, at least half of them are like sold out. So that's a really cool opportunity.
Can you remind us when that is?
Let me look. I have the thread up right now.
Because I know it's coming up soon. I think this is most
September 23rd. September 23rd.
September 23rd. Yeah, I think it goes for almost about a month because I think it's been going on for the last 2 weekends. Am I correct on this, Numi?
2 or 3.
Yeah.
I'm gonna link Parth's thread right now in Twitch chat, just him talking about all these teams and like some storylines.
Yeah, thank you. And if you can let Jordan know, I'm sure she can put that in the YouTube comments or YouTube description as well for the episode. So, yeah, go check out Gamechangers. I think it's really cool. I hope that Riot grows the League One over to be, I think, as prominent and as exciting as what we've seen them do on the Valorant side. Because yeah, I do think it's a little hidden away right now, which is a little disappointing. But yeah, thank you so much, Numi, for calling in and promoting it. Anything else that you want to shout out here?
Nothing much. I'll link if you're in Los Angeles, please support these teams. I think it's really cool with like really interesting opportunities. Yeah, shout out Twitch chat. Y'all really active right now for like today. So shout out Twitch chat.
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much for calling in as always. Really appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
I appreciate it because I've also just been like under a rock. Like I had no idea because I'm just like DJing gaming and ignoring life.
Yeah, we really need to get somebody on to talk about it. I think Mark and I have been trying to figure out what to do with these episodes while there's not much going on, and I think that'd be a good episode. So maybe next week we'll look into it. No promises, but we'll see if people are available. All right, Mark, how conscious are you right now? You seem like you woke up over the course of the episode.
I mean, some of these takes were pretty fun, so I definitely got fired up.
Yeah. All right. Anything you want to promote or plug?
Nope. Just
Hey, that was great. I really appreciate that. You did a lot there. Okay. For me, I want to promote a couple things. One, I will be at MXP. Well, first off, I will be in 2 weekends from now at Magic Vegas, the 22nd to the 24th. So if you're there, please say hello to me. I will then be at MXP Portland, October 13th to the 15th. After that, or Command Fest Portland, it's MXP/Command Fest Portland, October 13th to the 15th. I will then be at Worlds in Seoul, so come say hi to me there from October, I think the 15th or the 16th, all the way through, I believe, the 25th or 26th is whenever I'm there. Then I will be at MTG Summit in Salt Lake City, October 27th through the 29th. So I'm going to be out there. Please come say hi to me. They're all really cool events if you live in any of those areas. They're all fantastic. Worlds is great, by the way. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one, but it's a little... I don't want to dismiss MXP Portland, MTG Vegas, or MTG Summit in Salt Lake, but Worlds might take the cake on the 4 of those. But I'm going to be at all those things. Please come see me at those things, play Magic with me at the Magic ones, and say hi and, I don't know, photobomb my interviews in Seoul. So that's it, everyone. We'll have a surprise test going up this week. I'm probably going to do another video because I've been doing some stuff with Drew. You guys have been seeing those, me sitting down in my living room and talking about stuff. Thank you, Mark, for coming on.
Yeah, I love this show.
Yep. He says that sarcastically, but I think he actually does mean it, just for people who don't believe it. Anyway, thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.